Okay, we are back to talk about episode 7 of Lady in the Lake, the finale, entitled My Story, written by Boaz Yakin, directed by Alma Harrell. A long, lengthy episode with a lot happening to tie up the story. So get right into it here. We start in 1952 when young Cleo and Dora sneak into Shell's club so they can sing in his talent show. Dora does end up singing, but Cleo, because she's the daughter of Al Sherwood, is offered a job as an accountant for Shell. We then flash forward to the night when Cleo was quote unquote murdered. We see that Reggie and Cleo came up with a plan to put Dora, who had overdosed, in Cleo's clothes and dump her in the lake. Back in the present timeline, Cleo does show up in Maddie's hospital room, tries to convince her not to write about her, not to talk about her, not to get involved in the story so that she can stay hidden and not lead to something happening to her. Maddie does, however, convince her that they should be able to tell the story and try to take down Shell at the same time. Maddie then goes to Officer Platt, talks to him about the case, but he's been fired. He wants nothing to do with that story. He wants nothing to do with that life. All he wants to do is run away with Maddie, but Maddie refuses. Maddie wants the story more than a partner, so she convinces the Baltimore Star to let her write it, to let her pursue it. She then goes to visit Slappy in prison. He doesn't believe anything about Cleo being alive, wants nothing to do with her. So on the other side of things, we find out that Reggie has been hiding Cleo, letting her stay with him. Reggie recruits Teddy to get in on a plan with his mom to take down Shell. So Teddy confronts Shell about Reggie working behind his back. While this is happening, Reggie and Cleo, who's dressed up like a man, sneak into the club and burn some of the accounting books. We'll talk about why that may have happened. Teddy confronts Shell and forces him to call the police, confess everything about the numbers game, everything about the Summers assassination attempt. And as a result of all of this, we eventually learn Slappy is set free. Cleo is left to go live the life that she wants. She first gives a mountain of evidence to Maddie so that they can write a story taking down Shell. Maddie ends up not writing a story about Cleo being alive. This allows her to escape to France and assume Dora's identity as a singer. Platt, one more time, interacts with Maddie. He does not want to be just a romantic partner with her, so that leaves her alone to become an author. She writes a book called Lady in the Lake, becomes a bestseller, it seems. She becomes famous, but in the end is left with not much. So a lot of things tied up here, a lot of things maybe not tied up here. What do you think about this episode? The whole con story that happened here? Anything that caught your eye?
I mean, let's start broad first, I guess. Did this did this feel like the same show to you that you've been watching for the past month and a half?
This felt to me like if we were watching 6 or 7 episodes of like a heist show, and this was the culmination of pieces being put together, and we're going to finally do the thing that either takes down the man or gets the thing that we've been trying to get all season. But it's, I get what you're saying, that some of these pieces didn't overlap for me on what we saw the first 6 episodes.
Yeah, I just kind of felt like the tone felt
Hmm.
different. It was wrapping things up and in a way that related to the previous 6 episodes. So it functions as a finale in that regard. But yeah, it kind of felt different, and maybe it is in part that I'm surprised that this is where we were going all along. We kind of called it on previous episodes of the podcast, but I don't feel great about that in a way. That it is indeed the case that Cleo is alive, and Dora did overdose, and um, basically things went right along the lines of what we were laying out before, right? So I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to say. In some ways, I feel like maybe I was a little bit disappointed that what we had predicted as a kind of speculative possibility is what happened. But then it shifted to feeling like we're watching Ocean's 11 or something
Hmm.
instead of what I thought was really sad story prior to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, because I did say, okay, let me sort of flow this from episode 6 to 7. So if you watch episode 6 and 7 back to back, where it's this like total vision dreamscape episode, and then this sort of con that they're running through the majority of episode 7, they do not feel like at all like the same show. So to
Yeah.
that point, it certainly is something where it's we're taking with a big grain of salt here, but yeah, it almost seems like I don't know. I guess this was much more about Maddie's story, quote unquote, and where she was trying to take this whole thing and where she ends up at the end of it because of this thing that happened with Reggie and with Cleo and with Teddy, but it almost then minimized sort of this big reveal and this big thing where they're able to take Shell down. It really was just in service to Maddie being able to write a story and write a book and kind of minimize what should have been probably the critical like elements of telling this story about which I thought the Cleo side ended up at the end being more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say because I think all of that's true, but then in a meaningful way, it almost felt like Maddie's story was downplayed in this final episode, or was there, but it felt a bit thin. Part of me almost feels like they could have used another episode. Um,
Yeah.
which is odd because at the same time there are things in this episode which I feel like if I were the editor, I might have suggested cutting or trimming down a bit. Like, did we need the first scene of the episode that goes on for minutes and minutes telling us things that we already knew?
Yeah.
Um, I kind of get the idea of, reestablishing something about the relationship between Cleo and Dora. I kind of get what they were doing, but it was actually like pretty long. I think it was going on 10
Yeah.
minutes there from that first scene. And I don't know if we needed to revisit the past of when they first started working at the club. That didn't feel like it did a ton for me. But then at the same time, on the Maddie side, we just kind of we hit the moments of her getting to actually be a reporter, of her and Clat and so on, but felt a little.
Yeah. It almost was like the Maddie pieces were just inserted to make sure that they had parts of her story being told throughout. And yeah, it could have been an episode, this episode trimmed down, one devoted to the Cleo story, and then one devoted to the Maddie story. And I guess, you kind of had at the end had the two of them meet and her turnover stuff so she could write her story and write her book. But maybe that's all that needed to happen in this episode. And then you move on to sort of what life is Maddie left with when she gets what she wants, but she's left lonely and with nothing because of it.
Yes, or something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you have the scene with Seth
Hmm.
tearing up her diary. I just don't feel like we ever really did get absolute confirmation about who Seth's father is biologically, unless
Yeah.
I missed
Only
it.
only implication, I think, and inference about Alan in previous episodes. It was inferred maybe it was Hal, then it was inferred that it was Alan, but just part of the is this why those diaries are being torn up? Because in the end, that, as we speculated all along, that really doesn't matter. And she
Right,
that
but I
that
feel like what does matter is a big part of the series felt to me as Maddie's story, where the stuff about the past is supposed to tie in along these lines of how she hasn't been living the life that she wants to live
Mhm.
as a writer, as a journalist, as a reporter, because of what happened in the past, because she ended up getting pregnant, getting married to a man she didn't really love,
Mhm.
devoting herself to being a housewife. And now she's taking this opportunity to pursue that dream of being a writer. And that's at least part of why she doesn't want to take Plaid up on, his offer.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, And it's kind of, it just feels to me like it's all there, but it didn't, at the end of the day, that part didn't come together and land in what really felt like a meaningful way to me. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's because I think Maddie says, when she in her first conversation with Platt, I'm not looking for a husband anymore. I think we've gotten the sense of we know what she wants. We know the type of life that she wants to pursue, which is her own agency, her own authority, what she's trying, the things that she wants to really do, which is to be a writer, which is to tell these stories, which is to investigate things and bring some of these things to justice that she's been working on for so long. Maybe it's a sense of maybe a lot of these stories, when the person gets what they want, they sort of are triumphant. I never felt that about Maddie. She's just sort of left with, oh, great, I wrote a best-selling book, which probably is the culmination of everything that she's ever wanted, but she just feels like she looks and feels like there's just nothing there for her anymore.
Yeah. Right, which I feel like that gets to a kind of question or a kind of tension that could have been explored a little bit more. Instead, it felt a little bit quick. And in her dynamics with Platt, I mean, that felt quick. Then also with her
Yeah.
son, kind of where is
Yep.
that left? That seems a little bit unresolved, or they're going to be a bit more kind of mined from that relationship. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think the episode is bad,
Yeah.
but I didn't love it when it
I,
comes to
I, I didn't I didn't love it. It told some of the stories it needed to. It tied some things together that it needed to. Um, it felt like, and again, talk about how long it is, that maybe it would have benefited from just did so much in 55 minutes, tried to put so much in there. To your point, why did we need 10 or 12 minutes at the beginning of them getting hooked up with Shell and how that all came about? We know that they've been there forever. We know that they're locked into this and can't leave. So yeah, just there were just a few, it seemed like, pieces of the strings that would tie these things together. Just some of those were missing, maybe in service of other stuff.
yeah. And then also towards the end, it kind of speed runs what happens in Baltimore for the next 2 years, which we'd hit on and wondered, is the show going to get into
Hmm.
that at all? And it kind of did, but it did in a way where honestly, you'd have to look it up to
Yeah.
actually even know what they were showing you, right? Yeah, it's like, oh man, then I hardly knew this what was going to happen to the city a year later, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, look up the Baltimore riots of 1968. So, I mean, that's one thought that I have is that maybe there could have been a way if they'd been given another episode that might have made more sense. It just goes slower,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and dig into some of the stuff a bit more.
Tell
We
more, show
get
more. Yeah, I agree.
we get no return to the Tessie case.
Yep.
I guess we're to believe what Bob said last episode, that Stefan's mother is the one who murdered Tessie, and so on and so forth. And we have no explanation of that Santa Claus scene whatsoever, unless
Yeah.
I
I,
completely
I, I
missed
thought
it, which,
I thought about you, and I, was hurting for you this whole time that you, we didn't get an explanation for that. But it is interesting that they went back and showed, in the past, things like the Reggie Cleo conversation after Dora OD'd, and sort of this is exactly what happened. We never really saw or heard, other than Bob's story to Maddie in the hospital, what exactly it is that happened to Tessie. You're right, that was not revisited at all in this episode.
yeah, none at all. So we wrap that up. You
Yeah.
know, we know what happened. Um, so yeah, it just felt like something was missing in a way along those lines, and
Yeah.
with a culmination of Maddie's story, this is also rather quick, right? We kind of jump to, hey, now she's written a book. I guess she's a successful author. Um, how does she feel about her life at that point?
Yeah. And she
Mhm.
almost, you don't have any conversation. Not that we just need an exposition dump at at the end of this finale, but you just have nothing but her at a book signing, her noticing the lottery, her noticing, and it just sort of seems like she's not. I mean, I think we're meant to think that she's not content or she's not or satisfied with what's happened, and maybe that's the case. Maybe that's just how I read it, but there's just nothing there after we see. Okay, we see what life she's pushing aside to get the life that she wants. We just get nothing, no follow up or no sort of meat on that bone.
Right, we can read into her facial expression or things like this. I would imagine that in the novel, there's more depth, there's
Yeah.
more internal monologue kind of stuff. And it does feel like whatever that is, because I haven't read the book, didn't quite make it through on the screen. And
Yeah.
so maybe we are supposed to think, something along the lines of what you were saying. We can note that she has had the falling out with her family.
Hmm.
Her relationship with Seth doesn't seem terribly good as we leave things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've been critical for the most part, but
I mean, there are several good things we can say. I mean, the story told and setting up and taking down Shell, I thought was very interesting. I thought compelling. The decision to involve Teddy, I thought was uh, very surprising, and in the end was an integral part of that whole thing working. Whether or not you agree with telling a child this massive secret and what they do with that information was the right thing to do, but it was, I thought that was a good story. Again, I thought the Cleo, Reggie, Teddy part was more compelling, or at least gave me more of what I was looking for than the Maddie side did.
yeah, let's talk that through a little bit because what we have is Teddy goes to talk to Shell, and Teddy tells Shell that Reggie has been stealing from him, basically,
Hmm.
right? Reggie's been taking the fixed numbers and having people place bets, and it's a little more convoluted than all that. And it seems clear that the purpose of this is distraction, right? To keep
Yeah.
Shell distracted while Reggie and Cleo pull off their heist arson. Um,
Yeah, I have questions about this, but yes.
yeah, yeah, we can talk about that too. But then it seems like Cleo thinks the plan is that Reggie is going to leave with her.
Yes, I think that
So
her understanding is they will go gather the things they need, take the evidence they're looking for. Um, we are able to then all go, Cleo, Reggie, Teddy, all go and take this to the proper authorities so we can take down Shell. I do not think that she ever anticipated Reggie was going to one-on-one confront Shell the way that they did, and maybe that's a result of how things were kind of crumbling, everybody trying to get out, the fire, all of that. But it seems like they're the ones that started all of that. So this seems to have been Reggie's plan all along. Cleo was just not a part of it.
yeah, I guess that's probably right. But the thing I'm sticking on a little bit is what ultimately happens, I think, makes more sense altogether. And it would make more sense for this to have been the plan, right? Um, whereas if Reggie had left, and then you'd have this hanging out there that you had Teddy turn Shell against Reggie
Hmm.
just as a distraction.
Yeah.
And man, you've got to have a lot of faith that everything else is going to go your way after that.
Yeah. You're driving straight to the police station asking for protection from that moment. I mean, I presume that's what they would have done. So
But I mean, even then, the police are on the take from Shell.
exactly,
I
exactly.
mean,
It's almost like
So
they were risking that because they knew Teddy had to come up with a story that Shell would be compelled to listen to, right? Well,
yeah,
he's not going to listen to some kid about some whatever, but if he's got some information about being two time, then okay, I'll go listen to you.
yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah,
But I guess my point is ultimately just what Reggie did instead,
yeah,
going and confronting Shell and pointing a gun at him and all of that. Um, Better plan,
yes,
except I guess also Reggie, um, by doing this, confesses to his role in things.
correct, correct, yeah. And I think that he's racked with guilt and so much from what he's had to do for Shell over the years that he just, I don't want to be free. I don't deserve to be free. I just, if we're going to take things down, I deserve to go with it. It's just my understanding of where his mind is at that time.
Yeah, which I wonder about. They do put in there how they shut down Shell's numbers game, and then pretty quickly it gets taken up as an official state lottery.
Yeah.
How much, I don't know, how do you take that? You could ask, how much better is the legal lottery than Shell's numbers game? Or you could ask, how much worse was the illegal numbers game than the state lottery?
Exactly.
If we're okay with one, should we be okay with the other?
That was pretty clearly set up as oh, when the illegal gambler does it or the mobster does it, it's supposed to be perceived a certain way, but when the government does it, well, it's regulated and it's okay, right? We can take your money that way.
Yeah, which maybe, right? Because I
Yeah.
mean, if nothing else, Shell was a bad guy for doing things like killing people and ordering assassination hits on politicians, and don't want
Yeah.
to forget about all of that. But I mean, look, you could make that argument. I'm sure someone would make this argument rather precisely that if you've got an illegal numbers game, because it's illegal, then violence is going to crop up around it. But if you have a
Hmm.
legalized state lottery, um, you don't get the violence, right? Maybe gambling is still bad, but people are going to do it anyway. You make it legal.
Yeah.
You take some of the money from the state lottery to fund the schools or whatever. I presume they still do that.
Yeah, that certainly was the read I had on it. And Maddie's face when she sees that is almost dejection, like we worked to try to bring this down, and then the state is just taking it over and looking at this line of people, out in this kiosk that are just there to just throw their money at this. What sort of message that's trying to say. I'm not, not entirely sure that that was what they wanted, but that's just sort of the impression I got from that.
Yeah. And another, I mean, just another level that felt a little underserved to me in terms of all of the stuff we've talked about in past weeks with the racial dynamics and, you know, Shell's argument that what he was doing was to help the black community in Baltimore and so on.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, which again, also like a murderer, don't want to do that, but tried to, grapple a bit with the extent to which he had something of a point or an
yeah,
ethos that you could take seriously. They hit on the NSRP last
yes,
week, but again, if that culminates in this finale, it does so really quickly, almost, in montage almost of like, hey, what happens in the future? But that's okay. You want to talk a little bit about the heist? Why
yeah.
or why
So,
they burned those
I
ledgers?
have two questions or concerns, I guess, about this, and maybe this is just my um. So I've tell anybody who listens, Ocean's 11 is one of my favorite movies, but there is a very, very serious problem with how they pulled off that heist. It just bugs me, 23 years later. So I don't know why when I watch these types of things, it just these types of things stand out and bug me. The number one, this whole plan ended up having to work on someone who was in the room working on the books that ended up being sympathetic to Cleo, this guy Vernon, that let her. And it's like, well, what if he wasn't in there, or what if it was someone that didn't have that feeling towards you? It wouldn't have worked, I guess. You would have been out of luck.
But I did gather on that front that this is how I read it visually, that she thought she was going to be able to get into that room with the key she had,
Hmm.
but they'd replaced the key with a combination lock.
Yes.
And she didn't know that they'd done that. And
Right.
then luckily she was able to get in anyway. So I
Yeah.
don't disagree with what you're saying, but
It's just she wouldn't be able to get in, but someone was in there. She had to tell him who she was, and he said, "Oh, okay. Well, what you're doing, I agree with. So I'm going to let you in, and then we're going to burn the books, which I guess I can only logically believe that they're burning the fake ones that sort of show or cover up the money that's being spread around, so that the only thing that exists is the actual books that show where the money really went. That's the only thing I can deduce from that.
that was my read on it.
Okay.
That they were burning the ones, as you say, the fake ones, the cooked ones, as it
Yeah,
were.
the
Yeah,
cookbooks
yeah, yeah.
are burned. Yeah,
The ones that you would show the cops.
exactly.
Like, hey,
Yeah.
look, everything's on the up and up. I think so.
Yeah. I mean,
I agree.
it doesn't make sense otherwise, because she hands over all this stuff to Maddie at the end. So she had to have some kind of books evidence to give. So they must have burned the ones that they would have otherwise said, "No, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what those are. These are our real books."
I think that must have been it. And then I guess the plan was also to burn down the club.
Yeah. I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I have some quibbles about this plan, Cleo.
Yeah.
Also the idea of her sneaking in by disguising herself as a man. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you could still tell it was her if you, I mean, I don't know, maybe if you looked close anyway.
At that point, you're just relying on Teddy as an escort having authority and people just doing what he says.
Reggie, I mean,
Reggie,
yeah,
Reggie, I mean, yeah.
yeah, really. And Shell recognized her, right?
Hmm.
He makes that remark to Reggie. So, you know, okay. But
Yeah.
this is the kind of point I was getting at with where we started, that it did feel a little bit to me like we went from this
Yeah.
contemplative show to a kind of be like, "Ba-na-na," and then like,
I mean, it's sort of,
uh,
I would rate it as sort of a B minus heist. It's it's good, it's creative. It definitely had some flaws in places where it seemingly fell apart, but they made it work.
yeah, and I suppose it's fun. I mean, I'm with you. I'm like a huge fan of a good heist movie, but there aren't really that many.
They're not. No, they all
And
have plot holes.
um, Inside Man's quite good. Do you ever see that? It's a Spike
That's
Lee
that's my
joint.
favorite. Yep.
Yeah,
That's my favorite.
that's okay. Anyhow, it's an aside. Go watch Inside Man.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, let's see, anything else? I do want to hit on, I guess, before we wrap up about Platt. He does reference Loving versus Virginia. I don't know that it makes a ton of sense that he wants to move to Virginia, but we're just going to let that slide, I think. I mean, you're talking about Loving versus Virginia as a Supreme Court case.
Yes, he references this that, oh, if we go there and this wins, maybe we'll get to, I'm not sure, quite sure he understands the complexities of what has to happen after that court case happens.
I guess maybe that's how to read it. Or, I mean, I was thinking, it's a Supreme Court case, so that's a national thing, but also that doesn't mean that things change and flipped
Yeah,
on a dime
laws have to still
either in
change. It
terms
takes
of
time. Yeah.
cultural acceptance of interracial couples and all of
Yes.
that, which he knows. And I did think this is part of, not to nitpick your summary too much, but part of what I felt in that scene where she goes to visit him, and says she's moving to her new place, and she doesn't want to be a wife again, but he could come visit, or
Yeah,
however she puts that exactly. Um, he asks her if she's going to let him in the front door,
that's right. That's right. Yep.
and she doesn't really answer that question, but her face says, "I don't know about that." And I think that was a key element to that scene, just to
To
note
which
this, that
he says, "Forget it. Never. We're not doing this anymore." Yeah.
right, because Platt is now saying that he is willing and wants to be in a relationship with her in the open and take all of the risks that
Exactly.
involves, you know. And so if Maddie isn't willing to do that, then he's not interested. We're done at
Yep,
this point. No more,
exactly right.
no more sneaking in the window, um, and all of that. So that's something to think about in terms of the decision that Maddie makes to prioritize what she's prioritizing in terms of
Yes. Yes.
um, writing and her public image and all of that.
Yeah. I think that's exactly how I read it. Yep.
Cool. So, anything else you want to hit on here before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's it. I am glad we did this show. It was certainly unique, certainly different than a lot of things we can find on Apple TV Plus otherwise. So I mean, it was a good show to cover.
Yeah, there were a lot of great things about the show. And again, this includes the music. Did you notice, Ryan, that the song that played during the end credits of the finale was ever so slightly different from the song that's in the opening credits of the series?
And I did not.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, was there a
You
reason for
go
that?
you go listen to it. I don't know. I enjoy the song. So, it ended, it faded, cut to black, and I just sat there listening to the song. But it's basically the same song, but it's a little bit different.
Okay, I'll
So
go
I
check
don't
that
know.
out. I'm gonna make myself a note.
Yeah, I did enjoy the music in the series. It was well done. It's well acted. It's a good story. Didn't quite know that it was going to end with a heist,
Yeah, exactly.
and I don't know how I feel about that. But okay, this is what it is, and I have no regrets about watching it. I've been enjoying talking about it with you for the past
Yeah, nor do I. Great,
month and a
good,
half.
yeah, good,
So
good show to dissect. Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please do leave a good rating, review, that sort of thing. If you're on YouTube, give a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Pop over to tvobsessive.com. You want to read some articles about TV? Follow the site on social media. Look for TV Obsessive on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and so on. And next week, we're going to check out Homicide: Life on the Street, which has just come to Peacock.
Yes, very excited.
Widely acclaimed show, critically acclaimed. Everyone says it's great. We've never seen it, but we're going to check it out, and that's what we talk about next week. Hope you all will join us.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into the first season, see how far we get. But very excited about watching the show for the first time because it's now available for the first time.
Peacock.
Yes,
Well,
yes, it is.
I think it's been available on DVD. We've hit on
Yeah,
this
if
before
you
when
wanted to buy the DVD box set, you could get it. Yeah.
there's a little bit of a barrier to entry in terms of saying, "Hey, I've heard the show is good. I'm just going to buy the DVD box set." But it's available on Peacock. So we're going to check it out a bit, and we'll be back next week.
That sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, see you then.